everyone. On behalf of Cofense and Carahsoft, I'd like to welcome you today to today's podcast, quarterly phishing review. We're going to be going over phishing intelligence and threats that matter as part of Cofense's Q3 Insights. They're going to be talking about phishing intelligence and trends that they've reported on recently. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. And with me, I have one of the key experts here, Joe Gallop, who is the manager of intelligence analysis at Cofense. So I'm happy to have him alongside myself to have this conversation. I think we have a lot of good content for everyone here. So just before we get started, we'll do a little bit of an introduction into myself and as well as, Joe, who we have on the call. For me, my name is Nikhil Gupta. I'm a SC or engineer that we have here at Carahsoft. I've been working at Carahsoft for about 5 years now and specializing in cybersecurity and phishing defense within our core cyber division. Been doing a lot of work with Cofense and other providers that we have around frameworks like zero trust and phishing and network and endpoint security in general. So happy to be here. Happy to have this conversation with Joe and just to kind of dive deeper a little bit into Cofense's quarterly insights into phishing intelligence. So Joe, obviously I have you're the manager of intelligence analysis at Cofense, but I'm sure you have some other stuff that you want to say. So I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nikhil. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here as well, talking about things that are really important. My name is Joe Gallop. I run the Intel analysis team at Cofense, and really we're all about stopping phish, keeping those pesky phishing emails from getting into the hands of email users, and so that they actually keep themselves from being compromised. We are a team of analysts and engineers who are really focused on solving problems, solving puzzles, finding patterns in phishing threat activity that we can use to stop phish and help other people stop phish.
Joe, thanks for that. And as you mentioned, right, I think phishing in general is just, it's something that, has been, around since the dawn of time, right? Ever since email started, right? There's always been instances of phish and phishing and just attacks that are happening. I think we've seen reports and we've done some other quarterly studies in the past where, we've seen, ransomware attacks and seen the rise of just email attacks that we, recently with COVID and just kind of over the last couple of years of how prevalent this is, right? Especially with some things that we're going to talk about today, like credential phishing and just ransomware in general in the past. I think all of these things, all of these types of attacks are very dangerous, and we've seen the impact, and I think there's no shortage of importance, right, to talk about this and just to kind of delve deeper into what things are our government users can be aware of.
Yeah, we're definitely interested in finding those trends that we can kind of pull out and identify and make sure that everyone knows what's important to look at, because it's easy to get caught up in things that either show up in the news or things that were important in the past and aren't necessarily important anymore. So we're really honed in on studying the trends, not only of getting out there and looking in the wild at what's being sent by the threat actors, but also what's actually making its way into people's inboxes, what's making its way past the secure email gateways and other security controls that are in place and actually getting into the hands of the users at companies across the country and across the world, really. And so we're learning from the wild. We're, keeping track of what's going on out there, but we also really want to be the network effect for people and security teams to learn from each other as well. And so other parts of Cofense are helping people. We have an arm called PhishMe that provides training resources and simulation resources to be able to train users to recognize phish. And once you do that, basically you've got a network of people, that human eyes that are trained, and we're kind of crowdsourcing a collection of, if you're reporting those emails, crowdsourcing a collection of suspicious emails from millions of trained human eyes among our customers. And so what we're doing in the intelligence team is taking a look at those emails. We are trying to pull out the trends, and we have the privilege really of and the fun in a sense of digging into these puzzles, determining which of those suspicious emails is actually malicious, and then diving deeper and figuring out what those malicious tactics, techniques, and procedures are that they're using.
Yeah, good point there, Joe. And as you said, fun. Definitely, I can imagine getting the, when you start to see the trends develop. I'm sure that is definitely, it seeing it out of all the data, right? Pulling it together and being able to see all those trends, being able to pull back on, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is the intelligence that we're observing, especially from users that are self-reporting. I think that's, I wish I could do something like that. It'd definitely be fun. I can only imagine what you and your team and the work that you guys are doing. Definitely a lot of work. I'm sure it's sometimes there's going to be some tough nights, but I think
Yeah, for sure.
but I'm happy that you guys have done the work, and I think I've definitely just having read the Q3 report, right, and trends report, and just seeing the analysis that was developed. I think I've seen I saw a lot of cool trends come out of that. I think specifically we were I noticed that there were some prevalent attacks with credential phishing, specifically targeting government contractors, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think as of today, right, with initiatives you may have heard, Joe, of a program called CMMC, and some other people have here. That's kind of like the federal government's defense industrial base security program, where they're trying to secure contractors, and I think there's very much importance being placed on, hey, we need to secure our contractors, right? We need to secure the people that are doing work within the government as well. And I'm happy to see that, I think, there's definitely some importance that needs to be placed there. I'm happy to see that that security is developing for contractors. And I think this is very important for anyone, that does work with the government, to realize that, hey, you are being attacked, you are being targeted, especially with this trends report that I observed. So Joe, let's get into that a little bit. I want to talk more about that
Yeah.
report. And so talk to me a little bit about some of the trends that you observed, right, with the Q3 phishing intelligence study that you guys did. I know you and your team definitely worked a lot on that study, had a lot of key points that came out of it. So to talk to me a little bit about some of the main things that you observed, and some of the ways that this credential phishing has been happening.
Yeah, and like you said, the phishing problem has been around for a long time. Practically as long as there's been email, and so it's a lot of things. There's a lot of things you can reach back decades, and and it's the same. But the important thing that we see, quarter to quarter, really every quarter, is that the phishing threat landscape's always changing. There's always something that's in flux, and the adaptation is really the adaptations by the threat actors are really one of the key things that we need to track. When they're learning that something's not working and they switch to something else, that's what we need to be honing in on, and figuring out for ourselves. Sometimes there are things that that the threat actors are doing a lot of in the wild, and we're seeing a lot of it in the wild, but there's a difference maybe between what's out there in the wild and what's actually hitting inboxes and what's actually really effective. So
I think not everyone realizes that too, right, Joe? Because I think when some of us just look at phishing, we think of the same old, emails that we give. Some of the stereotype emails we've seen in the past, like, hey, give me your information, or this is the IRS or whatever. We need your information, stuff like that. But
yeah,
you're right, it does change, and I think that is something that needs to be made more aware to people.
Yeah, and it changes in multiple aspects across the phishing threat landscape. Three of the main things that we cover in our quarterly trends review is the prevalence of different types of malware that are being delivered. What are the delivery methods, and some of the trends also in credential phishing as well. So as far as the malware goes, it's important to recognize that there are going to be a lot out there in the wild where they're delivering, threat actors are sending lots of phishing emails and malware delivery emails that are going to be delivering a lot of old malware families and may not be sophisticated. We do want to keep an eye on what's going on out there in the wild. Right now, the most prevalent malware, and really just any time that it's active, Emotet is the most prevalent malware. It really takes over. No matter what else is going on at the time. If Emotet decides here, this is a week where we're going to start sending emails, it really just kind of dwarfs everything else in terms of the actual volume that's getting sent. Among the top 5, in terms of malware types and malware families, what's getting sent these days, we're going to find, your usual suspects. Those are, loaders, keyloggers, information stealers, remote access Trojans, banker malware, and, some of the common names among the malware families as well. And Emotet always tops the list whenever it's active. And even if it's only active for a short period of time, you're going to see that it always shows up. Agent Tesla, really common keylogger, form book, and information stealer that steals information from your machine as well as from your browser. And then rats that allow threat actors to keep control. Remcos rat is usually one of the top. And then Quackbot is a banker that also acts as a loader, that often ends up at the kind of the bottom of the top 5 lists. Still relatively common, but not by far not the most prevalent of the malware families that get sent out. But what's interesting to us, and the reason that we have identified Quackbot in this quarterly and also in the previous quarterly trends review that we put out, was that Quackbot, despite not being the most prevalent or the most high in terms of volume that's being sent, it's actually by a long shot the most common in terms of what's actually reaching inboxes. So what's getting past security and actually reaching the users and giving them the most opportunity to actually click on it.
The point of infection, basically the infection rate of Quackbot, you're saying, is just much higher than what you've seen, right, for others.
Yeah, the infection rate, it's probably higher. We don't necessarily measure infection rates, but as far as what gets its way into the inbox, so there's a lot of security controls out there that are keeping emails from even reaching the inbox. The spam, whether it's spam filters, secure email gateways, other controls that SOCs are putting in place based on Yara rules that they've written or whatever, that are keeping the emails from getting into the inbox. But a lot of these emails that are delivering Quackbot are actually, despite not being the highest in volume in terms of what's being sent, are actually the highest number of any malware family that are actually reaching the inbox.
Is that a weakness with the secure email gateways, or is that, with the R rules, or is it just the type of malware that it is?
It's, in many ways, the sophistication of the threat actor is dependent on the tactics and techniques that they're using. And Quackbot specifically likes to use techniques that make it difficult for secure email gateways to catch on. One of the things that they do, which Emotet, kind of in contrast to Emotet likes to use subject lines that they've grabbed out of old conversations from inboxes that they've compromised elsewhere, and they'll just grab random subject lines and they'll apply those to any and all of the emails that they're sending out, and it's all random. And whereas Quackbot will often actually inject themselves into a conversation, and they'll use an email account that they've compromised and continue a conversation, or use an old subject line from a conversation with another account and actually target that specific account, as opposed to grabbing a random conversation, subject line from a conversation on another account that they compromised, a year and a half ago.
I see.
And so Quackbot's doing that. They're actually injecting themselves into the conversations and using real subject lines that are pertinent to the recipient. And they are also using embedded URLs as opposed to attachments a lot of the time. They're using embedded URLs that lead you out to download the attachment somewwer else, download the file somewhere else, the payload. Whereas a lot of times Emotet is just sending things out via attachment, or the attachment's zipped up into an archive and you actually have to put in a password and things like that. So in many cases, it's easier to catch those attachments than it is to catch the URLs.
I see. Yeah, so definitely just really targeted, it seems, what Quackbot is doing, and I think that's just in general, right? When you see a subject line that's pertinent to what you guys are doing, or if you see a targeted account that, someone that you seemingly trust inside your organization, and then there's a link inside rather than an attachment, so it definitely gets passed and you click on it. Yeah, it seems like that would be something that, I mean, it could be easily missed, right? And it can,
Yeah.
and I can see why it gets past the detection methods that we see with secure email gateways.
Basically, they're, with those embedded URLs, they're doing what credential phishing does. And it's one of the reasons that credential phishing is so much more prevalent these days than malware delivery, is that, it's so link dependent and as opposed to attachment dependent. And when you're using links, you have the opportunity to abuse trust that you don't get with email attachments, because there's nothing in that email attachment itself that says, hey, you can trust me, right? Whereas if you're using an embedded URL, you can actually make use of domains that people trust in their day-to-day business, right? Everybody knows about the Dropbox abuse, and SharePoint domains and things
Absolutely.
like that. Adobe, a lot of times, they're going to use. And those are all trusted services that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. And if they can figure out a way, to create a link that either appears to be or actually is hosted or redirects through resources that belong to Microsoft or Dropbox or whoever it is, they get to make use of that trust. They abuse it. And so a lot of the threat actors who are delivering malware have really taken that tack as well. Some of the more effective ones, especially Crackbot, they're using those embedded URLs because they're able to not only abuse trust, but also to create, they create their own domains that there's really maybe no record of malicious activity for. So you can do a lot of things when you're using URLs as opposed to using attachments. And that's one of the things that they really, really like to do in combination with other things. But it's that really the amalgamation of all of these different effective tactics into one make Quackbot really stand out above everything else. When we're looking at it, it's just head and shoulders above everything in terms of what's actually making its way into people's inboxes and getting that face time. That's really what the threat actors are about. They're about getting face time. And if they can get it themselves in front of the users enough times, they're going to find somebody. They want to find somebody to click on it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, just more attempts at bat, right, means that they're going to eventually get a hit, right? So
yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit more, Joe, about these domains that you were mentioning, right, with the credential phishing. And I agree, right? Domains being just, as you said, just kind of compromising a trust, right? I think it's going to be a lot more dangerous, right? Because you can notice a link or you'll notice a domain that you think, hey, I've gone to this, 100 times a day, right, previously, but I'm not noticing that this is either a spoof domain or a mimicked one, or just one that maybe is harvesting my credentials as I enter them. It could be legitimate, but hey, under a situation where they're actually taking my credentials as I enter them. So talk to me a little bit about some of the domains, the top domains that were seen in your report recently. I know there's a lot of time that you spent on that, and what are some of the things that I guess that are kind of a notice or of what customers should pay attention to when it comes to domains?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think some people or a lot of people are aware of what the really common ones are. The abuse of SharePoint and OneDrive and things like that. Although there may certainly be people who aren't, so it might be worth mentioning those. But there's a lot of things that people tend to know about already. Dropbox abuse is one of those. But the phishing threat actors have gotten pretty creative. Basically, anything that allows user-generated content or user-generated links can be abused for them to host their credential phishing resources. And so we've seen them really pick up on things like domains like glitch.me and like Evernote, because those are services that, if you're not familiar with glitch.me, it's a collaboration platform that allows you to collaborate on coding and other projects as well. So you're sending things real time to other people for them to take a look at and verify and collaborate on and add to. So glitch.me and Evernote is one that a lot of people are using these days, just in general, to keep their own records or share old records with other people. And so you've got all of this content that users are generating, and they have to have a resource to link to it. And so any of these types of of services that we trust that we have to generate content and links through. Phishing threat actors can also generate content and links through. Those are two of the ones that have really shown up recently. Glitch.me is one that was really prominent throughout the first half of 2022. It kind of dipped down a little bit in Q3, but it's still definitely there, and they're just getting creative with these.
Yeah, so perfect. So Joe, I think to that point too, right? As you mentioned, right, just some of the domains, I think they're all ones that we are more familiar with. I think, as you said, glitch.me is definitely one that has come up. So for those emails, for those links, right? Let's say somebody clicks on one. What are some of the things? What are some of the signs that they can use to detect that, hey, this might be a spoof domain, or hey, one that has hosting or potentially attempting to steal my credentials? Are there things to look out for that any of our listeners here can pay attention to? Or hey, like, hey, if I find myself in this situation, what can I do, right? What can I do to respond, or what can I do to mitigate some of the issues?
Yeah, there are a number of things, and a lot. Some of it will depend on the specifics of the campaign that's targeting them, and we can talk maybe more about some of the specifics. I think you wanted to get into the stuff, some of the credential phishing that's been targeting government contractors, but just in general, as far as what people can be on the lookout for with credential phishing overall. A lot of it starts before you even get to the question of whether you click on the link is just questioning yourself and saying, hey, is this an email that I was expecting to receive, right? Because a lot of these emails are could be and are in many cases emails that you wouldn't really expect to receive in the position that you are in at a company. And so just making sure that it's something that just fits the general profile of what you should be receiving on a day-to-day basis. Just making sure that it's from someone that you've had contact with before, and if it's not, then you scrutinize even more. And once you've just questioned yourself, okay, is this something that I would be expecting to receive? If it is, then you want to take a look at, okay, what's where did it come from? What's the email address? And a lot of times email addresses are spoofed. You have to really take a good solid look. They might be, actually copying essentially a real address, a real trusted email address. But in many cases, they're actually just making the email address look like they've created a new email address that looks like something that's trusted. So really scrutinizing the email address itself and, making sure that it checks out there. And then once you get beyond that, looking for consistent typos and errors in the text that make it, look like, because a lot of these these emails are sent by people that are doing this in foreign countries. So there's a lot of errors there. But once you actually get into the link and, whether you should click the link, there are these trusted services they're abusing. And sometimes those links are really unique. And if you're not certain at all about whether you should click something, you probably want to go ahead and click that report button. If you have a, Cofense report phishing button, if you're not certain, you've got that button, you click it. But if it does look something that you would trust and you click through into it, then you still want to go back to the, that bar at the top, the URL bar at the top of your browser, and just make sure that it took you where you were expecting it to take you. And that's one of the real keys, is once you get into the later stages of the phishing campaign, to be scrutinizing it every step of the way, every single time you click something or the URL bar changes in any way, because they're going to use a lot of these trusted services as redirects to pass you through that. And then they're going to send you on to something else where they've got the real content, phishing content hosted. And so you just constantly be scrutinizing that URL bar and making sure that they didn't send you somewhere that they didn't say that they were going to send you, or that you weren't expecting, or that isn't a trusted domain.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. So I think, as you just mentioned, Joe, I think scrutinizing that domain, scrutinizing that URL as you see, to make sure there's no redirects. I know internally, Carahsoft, we use, we have Cofense currently, and I know we send out some test emails, and I always sometimes check to see, if, as you said, right, if does the email sound suspicious, even if is it from someone that you've never had contact with. In one of the cases that we've had when we did a test email, it was, obviously Carahsoft. It ends in an SOFT, right, for software. I didn't notice this, but the spoofed email domain had Carahsoft. It was an extra
Mm-hmm.
H added, right?
Gotcha.
So things like
Yeah.
that, right? Those are always things that you should pay attention to. And at first glance, right, you might not notice if you're looking quickly, but as I think as warning to everyone, of course, just always be always scrutinize, always look, always just consult that domain or that email address that you're receiving that email from. Is it truly that person that you trust, right? And then if there is a link and you have to click on it, right, you to share something, just make sure that it isn't going to a spoofed website or one that's a redirect. So yeah,
Yeah.
Joe, thanks for that intelligence or that analysis there. One thing I want to add to, or I guess to kind of get towards the end of this, so that we're running, looking at the time here, Joe. And we could obviously talk about this for hours, but when it comes to phishing in general, and I think with the campaign and the intelligence report that you guys did with Q3, I know we spoke about this in the beginning, but credential phishing for government contractors was a big result of the
Mm-hmm.
campaign that we saw for phishing back in Q3. So talk to me a little bit about what specifically made government contractors more susceptible. Hopefully the results, what were the results of the campaign? Is this something that we need to be aware of, or is this something that, are we in a doomsday scenario now, or what is the what were the results, and what should we look forward to, and what should we prepare for going forward, especially when it comes to that credential phishing attack that we talked about?
Yeah. So one of the things that we looked into Q3 that you're referencing there is digging into a particular set of threat activity that was targeting government contractors or potential government contractors, and we've all heard about script kiddies, just unsophisticated threat actors that are just using scripts to send out in emails, and they're not very well crafted. And then we've got that on the other end of the scale, we've got these APT groups that are backed by governments, and they are sophisticated in a lot of different ways. And you've got a whole spectrum in between. And what was really interesting about this particular threat activity set wasn't necessarily a massive increase in volume, or that we're seeing an uptick in this recent quarter, but it's been really interesting. And talking about the fun of figuring out puzzles earlier, it's been really interesting to watch the development of this activity set and its sophistication over time. They've gone from being pretty simplistic in many different areas of the phishing, the credential phishing campaigns targeting government contractors, to being a lot more complex. They've changed the email contents. They've got, created more extensive email bodies and put in realistic logos. They've changed the contents of the lures. This whole activity set is based around the idea of sending out invitations to bid on government contracts, right?
Oh, okay.
And so they have an email that kind of introduces it all, and has information specific to the recipient, so that it looks like it's actually for the recipient. But then they have a PDF, and they would generally have a PDF as the lure attachment in the email. And they've improved those over time. They've put in cover pages with believable and realistic logos and things like that. They've changed. They used to, at the very start 2 years ago, when we started watching this activity set, they used what seems like it might have been a real name of who the actor that was doing this. But over time, they've changed to the point where now they're actually changing the metadata in the PDF to represent an author name that looks like they'll use actual take the exact names from documents that they know of that are government documents and put that into the metadata so that it looks real.
Wow.
They're including in these PDFs a lot more technical information about the bidding process, telling people that you shouldn't try this. Once you get to the website, don't do it more than once, because then you'll ruin your chances. And that's their way of keeping people from figuring out what's going on, because
Yeah.
they direct people at the very start. Don't do it. Don't submit more than once, because that's going to, ruin your bid. Little things like that, adding in details, changing the appearance and the behavior of the credential phishing pages. So they started out 2 years ago with just a single landing page that you would come to, immediately put in your credentials, right? That's what they're looking for. They're looking to get those credentials. But over time, they've developed where they're making exact copies of government websites. They're spoofing the domains like we talked about before. They're using domains that look very similar to a real government domain, with a few letters changed or what have you. And they're creating a whole website that's an exact copy and has multiple interactive pages that serve as like stages throughout the phishing effort to get you to the point where you think this is a real thing, and by the end they're hoping that people will believe it and put in their credentials. So much more complex, and it's been very, very interesting to watch this develop over time. And that's why we kind of called it out, because we think it's important for people to recognize, especially in this case, government contractors, to recognize that they're being specifically targeted, and not only government contractors, but also companies that might be considering becoming government contractors, because they're using these invitations to bid, which works for both, right? They're able to target. And so just watching that sophistication develop over time to and get somewhat more frequent, but also just increase in complexity and believability.
Yeah, so I mean, for all of our listeners, I guess government contractors in general, I know Carahsoft, we work with a number of them for some of those opportunities for bidding, right, Joe? I know some of us do, we respond to those, right, for some of those opportunities on behalf of some partners. When I read the report and now talking with you, getting your points on it and everything, Joe, it's definitely eye opening a little bit, and it's something that it wasn't made aware to me, or I wasn't aware of before. But as you said, right, it's interesting to see it develop and become a kind of a point of contention now in the phishing area, right, and in the phishing realm, and I think in general, right, it's something that we all need to be mindful of, especially because sometimes those bids are time sensitive, right? They require urgency, so those usual criteria that we use to look at a phishing email and displace it and say, hey, this is asking for something by tomorrow, right? That seems suspicious. I don't trust this email. But if it's responding, it's regarding a bid that is legitimately due by tomorrow, right? You might miss that, and it's something that kind of plays on that and kind of takes advantage of the urgency that a lot of people have when it comes to this. So definitely, as you mentioned, Joe, that's definitely scary and but definitely eye opening. I think there are a lot of things we can look out for when it comes to those, but everyone should take a more vigilant eye for sure when it comes to seeing and responding to those, and just government contractors just in general, right? They should be aware. So, Joe, I guess we talked a lot, obviously, about some of the stuff and some of the insights. Wanted to kind of leave the floor open for you. As we're approaching the holiday season, right? Thanksgiving is almost upon us, and Christmas is coming as well, and we're already at that time of the year. Anything that you want to tell the listeners as far as stuff to look out for, or any other further insights in the Q3 report that you guys worked on and released? Is there anything else that you want to maybe make known for the listeners today?
Yeah, I think one of the points I want to leave people with is threat actors don't keep doing things that don't work, right? So if this is like just going back to that campaign that we've seen over the course of the last 2 years, and we've been watching it develop. We don't know exactly how successful that campaign is in terms of actually getting credentials and getting people to believe. But considering that they've been doing it for 2 years and using the same themes and improving their techniques, but using the same themes, it seems to be something that's consistently working. And there's really no time like the present for anyone who's in that area, but just also across the board everybody's receiving phishing emails everywhere. It's not just government contractors. Get yourself up to speed. If you're someone who's actually responsible for security at your company, to make sure that your users are getting trained, because you've got to have that combination of human intuition and human training to recognize the things that automatic security controls aren't able to recognize. And so making humans not what we normally see them as, as the weakest link, but making humans a critical component of your security posture is really important. So being aware of campaigns like this, keeping up to date and doing those simulations, like you were saying, is really important. As far as, specific to the holidays, as I said, their threat actors aren't going to do things that don't work. One of the things that they've been doing for years is using shipping themes. And this is kind of a more personal thing for individuals at various companies. They've used shipping themes for years, just general ones like, here's your confirmation number,
Yeah.
and look into this and click this link, and refund scams where they said, hey, thanks for your purchase, and you're like, I didn't purchase that, let me click over here, let me call this number, all that kind of stuff. And as the holiday season approaches and everybody's doing a lot more shipping, everybody's sending and receiving a lot of packages, there's probably going to be an uptick in the shipping theme. So just be really aware of that as well. Is what I would say to people just in general across the board, for this season as we're going into it. They're using them for a reason, because they work. Don't let them work on you.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Joe, and thanks for that. And just really want to thank you for being here as well, Joe, and just chiming in and giving some of the analysis that you had, right, for Q3 trends. I learned a lot for sure, and hope our listeners did as well. And it's always good to hear from the expert, right? So again, just on behalf of Carahsoft and Cofense here, everyone, we want to welcome again, Joe. Thank you for participating and sharing your insights here.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. It was great to be here.
Sounds perfect. Joe, I want to wish you obviously, a great holiday season for the rest of our listeners as well. Just the same. And just as always, a reminder, guys, as Joe mentioned, I really want to harp on that point, right? Making your users, training your users, right, to be the front line, to be kind of like a front line of defense for you for phishing, for any of those emails that get past what you're already doing, right, with email security. All those are going to be central components. I know Cofense, we work with them, and they're one of the leaders for sure in implementing stuff like that, and training users. And of course, I always find the intelligence and threat, the trends reviews that you guys do at the end of every quarter to be so insightful. I'm happy to keep reading those, of course, and I hope the rest of the listeners, if you guys are interested, we can definitely, forward some of those trend analysis reports to you. But with that, anyway, thank you so much, Joe. Thanks everyone for the time, and we'll definitely, stay tuned for another installment, for another maybe next quarter, another podcast here. We'll come back and we'll do a repeat analysis here for future trends and maybe a Q4 report. But anyway, thank you so much. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Nikhil.
Have a good one.